Welcome, everyone, to the Garden Nerd Tip of the Week podcast, where garden nerds from around the world talk shop, share stories, and offer their favorite tip. I'm your host, Christy Wilhelmi. Our guest this week was featured recently in the LA Times for his home orchard. Jose Ramirez transformed a weedy patch of land into a low-water, fruit-filled paradise in the heart of Los Angeles. Jose is an elementary school teacher, artist, illustrator, and residential orchardist. Welcome to the podcast, Jose.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm really glad to speak with you. A friend of mine had posted the LA Times article that you were in on Instagram, and something about it made me click through and read your story. And I was like, God, I have to talk to this guy right after that. So I want to know, how did this fruit-filled fantasy start for you?
Well, it could go way back to being a kid and growing stuff with my family, my dad. Come spring, we would grow radishes and tomatoes and chiles, and he also had fruit trees, limes and lemons and a couple peaches. And eventually we would also get like guayabas and pineapple guayabas and grapes and passion fruit. So that kind of was part of growing up. But then, later on, got a house and started trying to grow stuff here, and had some success and some failures. But it was still at a small scale. And then there came a time when I was like getting really interested in finding different fruits, or when I would travel to Mexico and I would taste really unique fruits or hear about these really awesome tasting fruits that I would love to have. And as things became more available through either the internet or like local nurseries, I just started bringing them into the backyard. And there was a lot of failures at the very beginning, but it didn't stop me. I just kept trying to learn more and more. And as I learned through books and YouTube videos and your book as well, I learned that a lot of it had to do with getting your soil to be healthy and happy and able to kind of be full of life.
Oh, you have my book. Do you have Gardening for Geeks or Grow Your Own Mini
The
Fruit
very
Garden?
first one.
Gardening
The
for
very
Geeks.
first one. Yeah.
Awesome.
I was at a community garden event, like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And you had just put out the book. I don't know how long ago you put the book out, but
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
yeah.
so the first time it came out was in 2012. And
Okay.
yeah, that was it. Or
Okay.
actually, I think it came out in 2013, but I was writing it in 2012. I
Okay.
don't remember. Anyway, yeah. So the new version is out. Updated, and that came out in 2020, but it's mostly the same book. There's just a few more plant profiles in it. Well, that's exciting. I'm glad I had a part in this and didn't know it. That's very cool. And I want to ask you about all these different fruits and the nurseries where you discovered the fruits that you were looking for. But before we get to that, let's talk about a little bit about your location. So you're located in Boyle Heights, which is east of the LA River. Which it's got a cultural history, or it's been a cultural hub for Chicano Mexican American communities. And I know it's hot out there. I mean, we're talking right now and it's 84 degrees in my house. I can only imagine how it's been for you during this hot season. So tell me, what did you start with and what does it look like now?
We live up in a hilly part of East LA. It's kind of, I always thought it was City Terrace, but truly the nature of Los Angeles, names are always changing. And so now I think we're part of Boyle Heights, but it's up in the hills of City Terrace / Boyle Heights. And when I got here, there was a lot of bushes and weeds that would come out every winter and into the spring. And it was really lush with weeds. And I had heard and read that that kind of life in your garden, then you have healthy soil. So we got rid of a lot of the bushes. We kept the only original trees that we kept were this huge olive tree that has a tree house on it now, a
Ooh.
pomegranate, a zapote, and a fig tree. Everything else we cut out. And that was like, we had a couple thousand square feet in the backyard of the house. And we were lucky enough to have our house next to two lots that were empty. So after a few years of getting to know the owner, every time he would come and cut out all the weeds in his empty lot, I kind of befriended him and asked him if he was ever interested in selling it, that I would be willing to buy it. And so he saw what I was doing and saw that I had a real big passion for plants and loved what we were growing. So He offered to sell it to me, I think around 2012, and started developing this. It's about 7,000 square feet of back of lot. So from the front to the back, it's still hilly, but we started kind of like bringing in tons of mulch, and trying to remineralize the soil. And up there, I have to kind of rely on city water. Since we have mostly established trees, I'm not really watering up there as much as I was 2 or 3 years ago, when things were beginning to really get into shape up there. Now the trees, there's like this one big section in that part of the garden where the trees are pretty big, so I haven't had to water as much.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners who are like, how much water?
Uh,
How often? Because these are established trees. They're what? How many years old now?
well, the ones on that part in that part of the garden might be, anywhere from 5 to 7, 8 years. There's some a lot of citrus and like some mangos and some figs and pomegranates. So it depends on the tree. The
Uh-huh.
avocados, the aguacates, they need a lot more water and they're
Hmm.
searching for water. But I've found, and I don't know about your experience, but citrus and pomegranates and figs and jujubes and some of those, they don't need a lot of water. They can kind of survive on rainwater once they get established. Like, some of my 1 or 2 year old trees, I still water them
Yeah.
regularly, because I do want them to kind of grab on, and after a couple seasons hopefully they'll do better. But there's another section of the garden where I really, the part of the garden that's right behind our house, where I could get the kitchen gray water or the rooftop water into the garden. Then I don't really water with city water, other than just that water when we get
Yeah.
rain. When we get rain.
And I could tell, I knew right away we were going to go off on a bunch of different tangents. Did you set up that gray water system yourself, or did you have that installed by professionals? Because I know for a time it was illegal and you had to sort
Yeah.
of sneak it in, and now it's legal, but there are restrictions. So what was without outing yourself, what did you do?
Well, my good friend is a plumber
Mm,
contractor, so we kind of like imagined a way to bring it out. And so after fine tuning it, and we're still fine tuning it, and we're still trying to figure out ways to keep it from, because it kind of goes to the backyard, and then I have it connected to a hose, and I could take the hose to different areas. But sometimes there's backup and stuff, so we have to kind of clear it out. And we're definitely going to be redesigning it and kind of taking into account all of the possibilities of how to improve upon it. But I thought we had a pretty good system, and we would have to kind of, clean it out, rinse out that main. It's like a 50-foot stretch of pipe that has to go underneath the house to get to the backyard, but it's at a
oh,
slope. And once it's there, it does kind of make it even to the farthest parts of the garden. So when we're washing dishes, all of that water goes into the garden pretty
oh,
much.
great.
Just from the kitchen. We're not doing any other water from anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah. And that's, I think we throw away so much water. So
Yeah.
that's really nice to know that. And fruit trees benefit from, they don't mind the
Right.
soaps that if you're using biodegradable soaps, it's
Yeah.
totally, fine.
And
But
there's no meat going into the backyard. We don't have any meat in the house, so
okay.
that kind of helps as well with my peace of mind, as far as knowing it's just green matter that's going into the garden.
Right. Because I know if there were meat scraps flowing out through that tube, there'd be some critters who'd be
Oh
very,
God.
very
Yeah, you're
interested.
right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
more equally or more importantly is like the water we get from the roof, because instead of it going down into the gutter, I kind of redirected it so that we have these adjustable pipes that we can just put in different parts of the garden, so that during a rainstorm, it could either be going right into the center area of the backyard and just kind of like going down into the soil,
Hmm.
or directed into specific areas that may not benefit from the water that's going into that central area. So given rainstorm, when we get, those 4-inch rainstorms over the course of a couple of days, it's really nice to know that all of that rooftop rain went straight into the garden, and that's a big amount of water.
Yeah, that is great. And so you don't store things in rain barrels, you just direct them straight into the soil lens, as it were.
Yeah, I figure, a good rain bucket can hold maybe 50 to 100 gallons, and that's nothing during a rainstorm.
Right.
Um, so it's much more convenient and economical to just have it go right into the middle of the garden. And we have areas like kind of like a French drain, I believe they call it, like where you
Hmm.
have like we have a bunch of gravel, and the water will be able to kind of like accumulate there and then kind of seep in. And those trees in that area seem to be pretty happy throughout the whole year.
Nice. Yeah. My next question was going to be about bioswales. If you have woven swales through your garden at all to get the water to the trees more specifically, or if it just, but you said gravel
Yeah.
pits. Yeah.
And yeah, and other than that, no, the couple sheds that we have built are like little structures, small little structures that we build. We try to make sure that the roof slope is directed in a productive way so that it kind of
Smart.
goes into that area. But yeah, no, we haven't done much of that.
That's really smart. And did you study permaculture, or because I think in the LA Times article that there was some mention of permaculture, but I don't know if you have have you had any formal education around that, or just like learning as you go?
Just through books and
Mhm.
YouTube videos, there's a lot of cool information out there, and it's like inspiring a lot of
Yeah.
times, and makes you want to go out and try it. And like people from all over the world posting tips and stuff. It's like, well, I didn't know about that one, and let me try it. And like, it's been a lot of fun just kind of checking that out. At this point, and with the weather and everything, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of be that way because we have to be conserving water, and I've been trying to, be mindful of all of that. So a few years ago, we did install drip irrigation. So all of the trees have access to the drip irrigation, but I haven't been using it in the lower level. In the
Hmm.
top level, only in certain sections, like I have been watering because the trees are still kind of small.
Yeah. So speaking of fruits, you did already mention that you have some really unusual fruits growing in your orchard. You mentioned, well, mangoes aren't all that unusual. I think they used to be, but now everybody can get mangoes. But you were talking about jujube and sapote. What else have you got growing that's
Um,
unusual?
So we have sapodillas, and those are like chico zapote. They're like this. They describe it as like a pear dipped in brown sugar. It's. We have a few different trees, and they're beginning to have fruit on them. With some of the trees were in the ground for like 10 years, and they're big, but they didn't produce fruit. But now they're beginning to have fruit. We have like this tree that's so productive. It grows really fast, and it grows these really small berries that are called Jamaican strawberries, and
Jamaican
they're really
strawberries.
good. We also have a couple of tropical cherry trees. One of them is called the Suriname cherry. I don't know if you've ever had those, but those are awesome, and we get those a couple times a year. Right now, I noticed this morning, in spite of the heat, like there was a bunch of red cherries on it, and we have the acerola, which is the one that they make vitamin C from or
Oh,
used to. It's a cherry that has a lot of vitamin C. We planted like a couple of summer bearing citrus trees, so orange trees. So the skin was kind of like a orange green, and I was like, oh, these still have more time. But a few weeks ago, I cut one open and it was totally ripe. So this tree's full of citrus, and it's like a summer. It's called Midnight Valencia. So
I was
that.
gonna say, is it a Valencia? It
Yeah,
is.
another one out there that has a lot of fruit, but one of the goals was to have trees throughout the whole year. So we're looking forward to having persimmons and papayas and guayabas later in the fall and into the winter. Also, avocados will be coming in, hopefully, if it doesn't get too hot in these next few days. And we are harvesting a lot of different varieties of jujube because we planted a few different varieties. So we have the ones that are bigger, the Lee, but there's some smaller varieties that are super sweet. And I don't remember the name, but I do have them labeled. But there was one that just kind of like it dries on the tree and it turns into this super sweet, soft jujube with barely a seed in it. And it was like eating candy. It was like eating a chocolate bar or something. It was
Oh,
amazing.
wow. Now I
Yeah.
have to ask, because you're saying guayava. Is
Yeah.
that guava? Is that what we all say is guava? The
Yeah.
rest of us who don't know Spanish say it's guava. So guayava
Exactly.
is the right pronunciation for that?
No, they also spell it as guava. So, but
Okay.
like at home, like we had a big guayaba tree. The seeds came from the town that my parents were from in Jalisco, and everybody just calls them guayaba. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Good to know. Because I
yeah,
know that there's also, I will say fajoa, which is wrong.
yeah.
But there's a foyoa, or how do you say
For
that?
the
Yes.
pineapple guayaba, right? Guava.
Yeah.
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 The hoa, yeah, Could be Portuguese or something, I think.
It's always intriguing to see
Yeah.
how well, because when there's Latin out there, the Latin name for everything, everyone butchers it because
Yeah.
Latin's a dead language. So
Slight variations amongst the fruit names because of that, I think.
right. So I wanted to ask you what techniques or strategies you used to build soil to support these trees, because you're at this point where you don't have to water them, so the roots must have dove down really deep.
Well, I had access to a lot of mulch for a while, for a few years. The arborists were dropping their mulch on Monterey Pass near South Pasadena and Highland Park, but they stopped it. There was like piles and piles of mulch, and I would see like fresh bark nuggets, and I'd be like, I gotta go right now. So I had in the back of my truck, I could fit like 9 trash cans, and I would just bring them up and spread them all over the garden until my back would be hurt, and then I'd have to take a couple of weeks off and then try it again and stuff, because it kind of takes its toll on you. But I was able to build up the mulch a lot. In addition to that, I've tried to have like worm bins and stuff, but definitely bringing in worm castings and putting the worms in different areas, remineralizing the soil with azomite or other sorts of minerals and stuff, and sea salts, insect frass, everything that I could kind of like hear about and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
That I kind of like used to get the soil happy and full of microbes. Also compost tea. So there was a long periods of time where I'll go and like have the compost tea brewing for like a couple of weeks every night, 2 or 3 buckets of compost tea, and brewing it with the bubbler 24 hours. I
Mhm.
use the brand Boogie Brew. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Yeah, I
it's
love the
really
guys
good.
at Boogie Brew. They're
Yeah,
awesome, and they're filters. So I recommend their water filters because LA tap
yeah,
water or any tap water is
yeah,
going to have chloramine and chlorine or chlorine in it, and the Boogie Brew filter filters that out.
yeah. We're using that one as well.
Yeah, I love those guys. They're usually, I've always run into them at the Heirloom Expo up in Santa
Uh,
Rosa every year, and they're always like, just like, here, take stuff. You need to
cool.
try this out. And I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
fine. So they're a lot of fun. Yeah, so mulch, compost, worm castings, and mineralizing. Perfect combination of things. That's really good. And so you found in this hot weather, as we're dealing with this and the drought, and I don't know if your water's being shut off for 2 weeks or not, but there are people who are they live in the zone where their
Yeah.
water's being shut off. In addition to the gray water and the mulch, do you have any other techniques that you use or strategies that you have for keeping your plants happy in dry, hot weather? Do you use any
Um,
shade cloth or anything?
no, well, I'm using cloth, but to keep the birds off of our fruit harvest, and that was awesome because in the past, when your pluots or whatever are ripening up, you don't even they're gone. But this time with the shade cloth, we were able to keep harvesting for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they were like getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, and there were no blemishes on them. And there was our flavor grenade pluots were amazing this year, and we just did it to some of the persimmons that were beginning to get a little bit orange in color, because I know the birds are going to start pecking at them. So we just covered them. We pruned them down so that we could fit this 16 by 8 foot shade cloth and use clothespins to kind of like encase it, and hopefully that'll help.
So you're draping it straight over the tree. You're not creating a structure for it or anything. You're just
No, in
draping it
this
right over.
case, yeah, I saw some guy on YouTube who had him all over his like berries and blackberries and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's a great shade cloth, because I was using bird netting, but I'm not a fan of bird netting, and
No.
it's not that, and then it's hard to put on and hard to take off. So I
Yeah.
saw this like more of a solid white cloth with a lot of air in it,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it works really awesomely.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I found that the bird netting doesn't work. I've done a couple different videos where I was trying to do bird netting, and then it did not work at all. The squirrels just got right through it. And then I ended up creating a contraption with an old umbrella frame, and put the frame open, the umbrella above the tree, and then put the bird netting on that. And so the bird netting's
Oh,
not actually touching the tree, but it works really
yeah,
great. And we had 0 fruit stolen since we did
yeah.
that on 2 different trees. I've moved it from one to another. But I love the shade cloth idea. I guess once it's pollinated and the fruit has set,
Yeah,
you can cover it and it's
yeah.
fine. That's a great idea. Now you are a school teacher, so, and I'm sure that this is part of your world is somehow integrating what you know about gardening into what you teach, maybe. I don't know. So have you opened up your orchard to the community or woven it into your classroom teaching at all?
Um, I have done some stuff in the classroom, and definitely before the pandemic, and we were getting harvests and stuff, different times of the season, I would take in different varieties and stuff so that we could count them and kind of draw them and talk about them, and then they could take them home. One fun thing was like there was a science lesson to talk about variation in plants, and there was the experiment was to have the students try out different apple varieties so they could see how they have changed and stuff, and how through natural selection or like people pollinating the fruit trees, they could get different varieties. So instead of using apples, I think we used citrus because I had a lot of citrus at the time and a lot of mandarins, and to see how the varieties kind of looked. And so I felt like in a little way we were trying to like counter what they get most of the time, which is, wanting to bring hot Cheetos or like um Takis into the classroom when, I really don't want to encourage that, but at least like bringing in the colorful, delicious fruit could plant something in their mind about, making better choices.
Yeah. And you've also served in the US Navy, which
No,
I,
no, my
oh, your
dad was
dad did. Okay,
yeah,
so let me rephrase that. Because I think I stole that from the LA Times article. So
yeah.
your dad served in the US Navy. I know there are a lot of vets out there who use gardening as therapy. Have you, I just, I imagine your garden is an oasis that you take pleasure in being in. But I also know there's that side where you look around and there's like so much to do, and it's sort of, you weigh the balance between having it be therapeutic and having it be a lot of work. So where do you fall on that spectrum? How do you feel about your garden most of the time? Or like, how does it work with you or help you?
There's definitely many times when it's just so much fun to be out in the garden working and looking forward to starting new projects and stuff. And lately I've had a couple friends come and help as well, and I see that they're really grateful to be able to work in the garden and learn about gardening and kind of interact outside, and at the same time maybe get some fruit and some practical experience. So I see like I try to make sure that it's always that way, but sometimes it's more fun for me to stay in here and work on my artwork, which is something that kind of that's one thing that would keep me from going into the garden, is if I'm busy with that.
Yeah, and I can see you've got some guitars hanging on the wall behind you. We're using the Zoom camera, so I can actually see him, listeners. But do you also play?
Not very much, but those were guitars that were made by luthiers in Mexico. And just from visiting and getting to know the style of music called jarocho music from Veracruz, those are jaranas and requintos and leonas that I collected from different guitar makers in Veracruz.
Wow, in Veracruz. All right. So where do you want to go from here? What are your plans for the garden? What's still to be done?
Well, one cool thing is like always looking forward to trying things that are beginning to fruit, right? So like earlier I mentioned about the sapodilla
Mm-hmm.
trees that we have a few different varieties. I've noticed some fruit on a few of them. So and I've tasted the fruit. They're amazing. So looking forward to having, and experiencing the flavors of new fruit. Like this last year we got aguacates from most of our trees, and so we were able to kind of try different flavors and different types throughout the year, and then be able to leave them on the tree and harvest them whenever you need them. So that was a lot of fun. But the other thing too, I think like this, and I was talking with person who helps me garden about how like we spent a lot of time pruning and kind of learning about how to take care of the pomegranate trees. And this year we've had a bumper crop of pomegranates on many different trees. We have a few different varieties, and they all had so many, and they were like bursting. And so we were like, you juice them. So I just used the juice squeezer. I don't know if you've ever tried to if you have a pomegranate, or we just went through like the regular juice squeezer and cut them in fourths. So I didn't have to peel them. I love eating them and I'll eat them too, but we just were juicing them and getting a fair amount of pomegranate juice that way. And that would be an awesome way to kind of like take care of a lot of pomegranates in making juice.
Yeah, I like that idea. All right, it is tip time. Do you have a favorite tip you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
Um, I gave a lot of other tips. I should have saved the pomegranate tip, but I would say just try to find ways to reuse water or harvest water because there's not a lot of water. And so if you can, like when we're making our juice in the kitchen, we put a bucket underneath so that I can clean it and take all of that juice water from the juicer and put it in the garden. I think the plants really love that, or the trees really love that.
Yeah, I was canning tomato. I'm sitting right next to my pressure canner. I was canning tomatoes yesterday and I waited for the water to cool and I took it out and watered a bunch of stuff with it because it's like
Yeah,
it's tomato juice.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I just want to ask about your pomegranate tree. What were you doing that pruning wise that caused it to give you a bumper crop?
Okay, so you always want to prune the 3Ds, the dead, the disease, and the diagonal. So if there's dead ones, also like I learned, and I'm gonna have to go back and do this on all of the apple trees, but you got your center trunk and you
Hmm.
got all of your laterals. You don't want those laterals that have other offshoots to be so long, right? Because then your fruit's gonna be hanging really far away from it and it's not gonna get as much energy. It needs to be closer. So we went through and we did the 3Ds, which gave it a nice shape, and then we made it shorter. And
Hmm.
that we did it in I don't know, we must have done it in the spring or something. Before they were super flowering and stuff, and then they flowered and they all have a lot of fruit. And I think those are good general guidelines for most fruit tree pruning, but it's a tricky, complicated, something you got to experience over many years to learn how to be a good pruner.
Yeah, and I think I recommend to people a lot, take a pruning class every year. I do it just to get the courage up to go out and prune my fruit trees. Even though I know what I'm doing, I just need a little boost, just like a little boost in confidence and a little refresher. And then I'm like, all right, I got this. And I grab my shears and I go out and make a bunch of cuts. I think that is always helpful
Yeah,
because there's every fruit tree has its own needs,
yeah.
and so you have to learn about those specific needs. But like you said, if you start with dead, diseased, and your third D is diagonal, my third D is disorderly.
Okay.
Yeah, dead, diseased, and disorderly, and that helps. Kind of that will shape the tree. And if you and I my whole book, Grow Your Own Mini Fruit Garden, is all about keeping trees small so you don't need a ladder to harvest them.
Cool.
And in your case, so you can get shade cloth over them and like not have to kill yourself trying to get that shade cloth on and off, which is great.
Let me clarify that because
Yes,
by diagonal, I mean that anything that's going diagonal across the center of the tree.
crossing branches.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, well, that's
Okay.
perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I had a great time talking with you, Jose. And let's tell people where they can find you.
Oh yeah. So I post pictures of the garden and the artwork that I create on Instagram under the name Jose Ramirez Art, and then I have a website that has a section on the garden and also some of the artwork that I do at ramirezart.com. Ramirez art.com.
Art.com. Okay, we got that. All
Wonderful.
right, garden nerds. I will post a link to these links, the website and the Instagram channel, as well as a link to the LA Times article so you can get some eye candy and learn a little bit more about Jose and his fabulous garden. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you stream. Visit us for tons of free gardening information at Gardenerd.com. Show your support for this podcast and the other free stuff on Garden Nerd by becoming a Patreon subscriber. You'll find us on Instagram and Twitter under Garden Nerd 1, on Facebook as Gardenerd.com, and of course, our Garden Nerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!